Hello everyone, my name is Aaron Christensen and this is Horror 101 with Dr. AC, celebrating classic horror throughout history with new episodes every Friday night. Tonight we'll be discussing what some consider to be Dario Argento's most successful and accessible horror effort, 1975's Deep Red, aka Profondo Rosso. David Hemmings stars as an English jazz pianist in Italy who, after a late-night set, witnesses a brutal murder and feels compelled to unravel the mystery with the aid of an intrepid reporter played by Daria Nicolodi. Often cited as the apex of the Giallo subgenre, this is Argento in his 1970s prime, with dazzling, dizzying camera work capturing beautifully violent, if occasionally nonsensical set pieces, all couched within the driving rhythms of prog rock band Goblin. 50 years later, it remains an undeniably important and influential chapter in Italian horror, as well as the genre in general. Here comes Deep Red.
I can feel death in this room. You have killed and you will kill again. Ah!
What was that?
There are ghosts in there.
It's time to celebrate 50 years of Profondo Rosso, aka Deep Red, and we have an amazing panel to chat about it with me. Let's bring everybody in, and let's say hello to Derek Botelho,
Hello there. Thanks for having me.
Kristy Jett,
Hi, I'm Kristy Jett.
Man About Town, Darren Callahan,
Hey, great to be back.
beaming in from the Rocky Mountain State, Larry Sternshein,
Hey, I'm very excited to be here.
and last but certainly not least, Bryan Martinez.
Buongiorno.
And we're going to be talking about Deep Red 1975, aka Profondo Rosso, celebrating its 50th anniversary. Thanks for coming on the show, buddy, and welcome. So this was one that I came to probably under the name of the Hatchet Murders. So I did not see Profondo Rosso for a very long time, but I'd like to just hear how everybody else came to this movie and maybe how it came in terms of Argento's body of work. Derek, you've written the book, The Argento Syndrome. So let's kick things off with you.
I think I was 21 and I had met this guy on a movie forum on the old internet, AOL kind of Yahoo movie board thing. And he was like trading and selling bootlegs. And he was actually, I think, in the Chicago area. I had only seen Tenebrae when I was like 13. And then I had seen Suspiria and I wanted to see more. So this guy just like sent me a box full of bootlegs, most of them from like Japanese laser discs and stuff. And they were all like, 10 generations down. You could barely see or hear them, but I was just happy to be watching them. So Deep Red was what I could see I really liked. Because I had seen Suspiria so much because that was the more readily available thing. And then to watch something like Deep Red that was so radically different really impressed me. And I love the music. I love the style of it. I love just how odd it was. So that was my foot in the door with Deep Red.
Great. And Derek, this is your first time on the show, so thanks for coming on. And Kristy, as well, it is your first time. How did you come to Deep Red for the first time?
I was a late bloomer on Argento. The first film I saw of his was actually Inferno. I'm going to say when I was like 21, 22. And then my first boyfriend, I was a late bloomer. My first boyfriend at 23 was also a horror nerd and introduced me to Profondo Rosso. And I was just the style. Oh my God, it was beautiful. The music, everything about it. And I was like, I think I need to watch everything this man has ever made. And I did. And this remains my favorite of his films for sure.
Darren, how about you?
Can I take a moment here, Aaron, to talk about your and I's friendship, because it generated with this film in an odd way. Aaron and I have known each other 20 years, and he's an actor, fantastic actor. And I was a writer, director, playwright. A friend of mine who'd written a play that Aaron was in, I went to see, and this writer friend of ours, David, said, you should talk to Aaron. Aaron loves horror movies as much as you do. You guys would probably really get along. So I think post-show, we hung out a little bit. And I don't know if it was there a week later at a different event, but we were talking about horror movies. And, I really acknowledge at the time, I only knew North American horror. I only knew stuff from Canada and the United States. So even though I'd heard Dario Argento's name as associated with Suspiria and Dawn of the Dead, I hadn't seen any of his movies. So Aaron, being the good friend he is, said, this is a huge problem, Darren. You need to remedy this immediately. So I had Netflix, the order by DVD mail in the 2000s. So I queued up 5 or 6 that I found on Netflix, and they just worked their way through. Now, in that day, Netflix would order them funky sometimes. So even though I put some of the ones you recommended the most up front, they were not available. So the first one I ever watched was Trauma. And I saw you at a theater party like a couple days later. And he's like, you watch any Argento? And I said, funny thing, I just finished watching Trauma. And I hated it. You were like, well, fuck, man, why did you start with Trauma? That's insane. That's like not a good one to start with. You should watch Suspiria. So a week later, I watched Suspiria. I came back to you and I said, I don't know, dude. It's clearly a good director and a good movie, but it's so fucking Italian. I don't know if I could do more of these. They're not my bag, baby. As a novelist as well, and I really like plots, and certainly you're not watching an Argento thing for a plot. I didn't realize that at the time. And so, again, I resisted it, and it's you, Aaron, you who pushed me through. I said, I'm good. I'm done. I don't think I'll watch anymore. I'm glad I got a little knowledge of it, but I'm cool. And then you said, Darren, you are being a moron. All right. So you like mysteries, because a lot of my novels were kind of Agatha Christie mysteries. Why don't you just start with his mysteries? Like watch Deep Red or The Bird with the Crystal Plumage or Cat o' Nine Tails. So within like a week, I had watched the first 2 he made, Bird with the Crystal Plumage and Cat o' Nine Tails, and I found them good. They were good. I liked them more than Suspiria and certainly more than Trauma. But then the third film I saw, I was starting to get into the groove by that point, was Deep Red. And my mind was completely blown. I liked it so much so that I watched Suspiria again, only for the second time in my life. And then I got it. I was suddenly on the Italian wavelength. The rhythm, it's like listening, it's like being a fan of the Beach Boys and then suddenly hearing Hindi music or something. Just the scale was wrong for me. I just could not connect with the tropes and the ideas and where it was going and the logic of it until Deep Red, and it totally unlocked it. And it is now my favorite Giallo film of all time, and it is my favorite Dario Argento film of all time. Although, the other slots kind of move up and down from time to time because I could get more or less into pretty much anything from the canon. But yeah, I'm excited to talk about it. And that's my story. My friendship with Aaron was basically based around Dario Argento.
That's so funny. I'd completely forgotten this entire episode. So I'm glad we're having you here so I could remember. Because I remember you coming to that reading and us chatting about horror, but I didn't think about the Italian connection.
After we do all the introductions, I have a little short Trauma story. That's all.
There'll be time for Trauma, guarantee. Larry.
Growing up, I didn't really have like a whole lot of like horror friends or anything like that. So it was just a lot of reading. So like Suspiria is like the one that everyone kind of talks about. And I remember renting that at the VHS store, and it was just unlike anything I had seen. So like pretty much throughout my year, I kind of watched a little bit here, a little bit there. I think the best Argento story I have also involves Aaron, because we were at our friend's house watching Phenomena, which was I had so much fun watching the monkey and everything. But Deep Red, the first time I saw that movie was actually at the Music Box Massacre. I think it was the Massacre at the time. I want to say it was like 2-3 a.m. picture. And I did fall asleep a little bit because, it's a 24-hour thing. I get tired. And going in and out of consciousness for Deep Red is completely weird, because the movie some of the stuff doesn't really make sense unless you're watching the whole thing. I didn't watch it again until they re-showed it at the Music Box of Horrors, because it's different people. They don't really know. And I was like glad, because then I was able to watch the whole thing. And I was just like, I love the whole murder mystery kind of vibe a lot of the Argento movies. So like and then the score for this is incredible. So I got to see Goblin live once and things like that. So
that's cool that you got to see both. But yes, I agree. I've seen many movies in the twilight hours of Music Box 24-hour marathon, and there are things that just kind of drift in and out. You're like, oh yeah, did I dream that, or did that actually happen?
A lot of those movies feel like a dream.
I saw the Funhouse at one of those, and I think it played at midnight. The first time I saw the Funhouse, I couldn't quite remember how the whole thing worked out, and so seeing it with fresh, awake eyes, it was a totally different movie in a good way. I really like that movie, The Funhouse. But that is something that Chicago and maybe other cities have, are those 24-hour movie-thons. There is literally only one here in LA. It's Quentin Tarantino's, and it's obviously very hard to get into. And they don't announce the films ahead of time, so you never know what you're going to get. But I love those. I picked up so many great movies from all those all over town in Chicago. It's really a wonderful community for that.
Coming back to Chicago, Bryan, who runs the Giallo room and who's one of the biggest fans of Gialli and Italian horror. Bryan and I appear regularly on Ian Simmons' Kicking the Seat podcast, talking about Giallo films with Ian, who is learning his way through the genre. But you and I actually talked about this movie, I believe, on one of his shows, the podcast version, not the YouTube version. Mm-hmm. But I don't know that I recall what your intro to this film was.
Because I remember back in the day reading Fangoria and seeing, I think there was a column called Deep Red or something. I'm not sure.
I think that was in Video Watchdog, but I could be wrong.
Okay. Yeah. Something where it was like, it confused my intro to Deep Red because I thought it was something else or whatever. So when I first started watching, got the poster behind me, the Dario Argento's World of Horror, that's when I first noticed, there's more to Dario Argento than Creepers, because that was my intro to Dario Argento. So when I first saw this, it was or Deep Red rather, it was a Hatchet Murders. Or when I first learned about a release or whatever, it was a Hatchet Murders, and then I was further confused. So finally I happened upon the Anchor Bay version of Deep Red, and I was like, oh, this is what all the fuss was about, all this confusion and whatever. So I was very underwhelmed the first time I watched Deep Red. It wasn't that I didn't get it, but I wanted more of Creepers. I wanted more of that, more of the boom, boom, boom in your face. So the puppet thing in Deep Red was awesome. That was wow, I want more of this stuff. But again, this was late teens Bryan versus the now more mature Bryan that is able to appreciate things like crazy robotic puppets jumping out of, things that require explanation. Now the filter has caught up with me. You know what I mean? So I'm on the other side of the spectrum in terms of now appreciating this movie for all its finer things that it gives to cinema rather than the amazing, awesome things that it brings to cinema or whatever. So it was, I think in the mid 90s, I discovered this movie. And then when I learned that it was supposed to be top tier Giallo, I was like, wait, hold the phone, buddy. Top tier horror or Giallo is things like the early Bava stuff or the Martino stuff. So to this day, it's not my favorite Argento. It's not even my favorite Giallo film. I think there's a mishmash of a perfect Giallo that exists, but this one certainly brings like the big guns in turn. This was like, for me, this was like Argento being like, okay, you don't like the romantic comedies? I got a Giallo for you. You know what I mean? So that's what this feels like to me.
Awesome. It's funny you say that, Derek, because I also came to this movie, the full 2-hour version of it, via a friend who I had seen Suspiria. I was vaguely familiar with Dario Argento. I can't say I was a fan, but I was talking about Hitchcock. My friend said, hey, you know, are you familiar with Argento? He's the Italian Hitchcock. And I said, okay. And like any good friend, he handed me a box of movies, and Profondo Rosso, the full 2-hour version, was among them, as well as Opera and I think Inferno. Bryan, you kind of touched on it, so I'm going to start things off with you. Like, what is it about this film that kind of represents prime Argento? Because I think this is a gateway. This one and Suspiria seem to be the ones that people kind of push people through the door for Argento and say, try this, you'll be able to tell whether you like it or not.
So I think this one has like it's totally in your face in terms of like the Giallo-ness of this movie, whatever. Like it shows the POV shots, the almost like the fetishistic shots of like the gloves and all the scattered like Giallo tropes or whatever, all strewn across the table. You know, like to me it feels like if you want to study the amazing genre of Giallo, this is definitely one that you start with. You know, I would, you know, grab a few or a couple from each filmmaker, of course, and then pepper it through and then create your little Giallo cornucopia, if you will. But this one, I think Argento's attempt at creating sort of, I guess, a cornerstone to the genre as we all know it now. Although, like, I would argue that when he made this film, I'm not sure if anybody knew exactly what the definition of Giallo was in terms of like a cinematic genre, right? But I think it definitely has all the hallmarks to the, you know, I kidded around with a friend of mine in preparation for this because that's one of his favorite Giallo films of all time. And I said, you know what, if this one had Edwidge Fenwick in it and George Hilton, like, I don't know, I don't even think it's got a JMB shot, does it? Like in the film? I don't think it does.
I don't recall seeing one this time.
So I think it's definitely, for me, it's top shelf Giallo. It's not necessarily, it's not eyeball, it's not strip nude for your killer, which is kind of, those movies are much more fun. This one, I think it's a little overlong for me. I do appreciate like the director's cut version of this or whatever for all the things that you might have missed, but sometimes I just feel like my attention span goes right out the window trying to watch Hemmings interact with Nickelodeon. Like it's funny, it's cool, it's fun, but I think that is much more pronounced in something like Edwidge Fenwick interacting with George Hilton. I think there's much more chemistry there. With these two, not so much. I like David Hemmings. I love Daria Nickelodeon, so don't get me wrong when I say that stuff. It's just for me, for my own personal viewing of it as a Giallo film, I wish it had other things. But as far as an offering from Argento, this one is definitely one that you seek out first when you're like embarking on your Giallo adventure.
For me, the strengths of the movie lie in one. I do think like the mystery of the plot, all that is interesting.
Yes.
And I think it was Darren that said you don't watch Argento movies for the plots. And a lot of people have said this. But I think they're thinking about like Suspiria and like the supernatural stuff. Whereas the bulk of his movies are these murder mysteries. And they're all plot driven. So I think that's sort of a weird idea to throw around. For me, Deep Red really is sort of like this weird launching point that sort of like lands in Suspiria, because if you sort of like look at what the Animal trilogy was doing, it's not until like Four Flies that things really start to get weird and stylish. Cuddling Tales has a little bit of it with like, you know, like the car driving through like the gallery, and you have like these like impossible viewpoint and like edits that are just really strange. Like Four Flies just like, it's completely just nuts. Like it's in this world, but it's a version of this world that's just kind of fucked up and weird. And I love that movie. I think it's the best of those three. It's sort of embracing something in his storytelling, in his visual language that he wasn't doing before, and that he would sort of do like a little bit more in the 5 days, which the same DP as Deep Red. And if you watch those two movies, knowing they have the same cinematographer, it's interesting because Deep Red sort of owes a lot to what they started doing in the 5 days with the camera work. And just the visual design of Deep Red, I think, is so stunning. And it's just such a cool looking movie.
Mm-hmm.
And Giuseppe Bassan, like the production design's just incredible. Just the whole world that it builds. I really like Daria and David together and their weird sort of banter. I really like that she is the stronger character and she's always putting him in his place. And the fact that it's almost a riff on like a 1940s like screwball comedy. And like these people land in this murder that's like this murder mystery that's really kind of dead serious. But it's so fucking strange that, like, how do you survive this and sort of not go crazy?
Darren, you talked about like the you don't come to a Argento film for the plot, and I agree with Derek. I think that this one is a very strongly plotted one, even though it's kind of Byzantine in that you are constantly zigzagging around to find those threads, and they all kind of come together at the end. You realize that everything was in there for a reason, but as you're going through it, you're certainly kind of like you're off kilter all the time.
Yeah, it's a film that feels like it's got a lot of cul-de-sacs in the script, and I kind of admire that about it. But let me just give you an example here and also plug your previous podcast. So we did a podcast, Aaron and I and others, on Planet of the Vampires, an Italian horror film from the 60s. And if you haven't listened to it, check it out. It's a good pod. You know, there were a lot of alien planet movies for a long time. And yes, a lot of them had very similar things happen in them or very similar tropes about them. And then Alien comes along, which is an A picture, is treated like a real work of art, not an exploitation film or a film meant to just generate a weekend or two of box office in a regional play. Now, I also think Planet of the Vampires is a work of art too. But point is, Alien kind of said you could take these same ideas and make it an A picture. I feel like with Dario Argento's films, he came as a writer. He was a talented writer. He can definitely know what a story is and do it, but it's secondary, maybe even tertiary to what he's trying to achieve in most of his movies. But he didn't quite have the skill to do it yet. Or what I think is even more appropriate, he didn't have the courage to do it yet. So I love Bird with the Crystal Plumage. I love Cat o' Nine Tails, but both of those kind of feel a bit like a television mystery with some great moments in them. And of course, that first film, Bird with the Crystal Plumage, has a knockout great score. So that really helps it along. And obviously, he pulls in some things from the tropes of Orgasmo and things around the time, other movies that have been made, Blood and Black Lace, that were officially categorized as Giallo. But I feel like, and I may agree here with Derek, even though I don't think Four Flies on Grey Velvet is a very good movie, you do sense he's like starting to put the things you're seeing over the things you're following. Deep Red has a plot that adds up for the most part. Got a couple bones to pick, but hey, I got a couple bones to pick with most movies. But what you see is every single shot of that entire movie is the most courageous choice a director could make. Let's do this important dialogue scene with the characters 200 feet away, surrounded by a statue. Let's do this shot where the time clearly doesn't work out between the murder in the apartment and somebody down below seeing it. Clearly that murder wasn't going on for 10 minutes while these people had this conversation. But the artistry of it, like, hey, let's build this Edward Hopper painting Nighthawks at the Diner in the middle of a plaza where it doesn't exist. Everything about how he uses the background actors, where he puts the camera, how he edits it, everything is the boldest choice possible. And it kind of reminds me of a director I'm sort of on the fence about, but I clearly admire his same sense of courage, which is Ari Aster. I recently watched Beau is Afraid, which is a 3-hour, 4-act kind of Greek comedy. And I have to say, whenever you see somebody swinging that wide for the fences, they could strike out. And often in the same picture, they do strike out. But in this, the batting average is very high. All these super bold choices, from the music to the lenses to the casting to not having some of the tropes in and yet doubling down on some of the other tropes, feels like a guy who's just finally like, fuck it, I am good and I am going to make my Magnolia or whatever, that that moment is in an artist's life where they're just going to go for it. Sometimes it's Magnolia and it works. Sometimes it's Babylon and it don't. But the idea is he really went for it here. And I don't picture that courage in any other movie aside from maybe Suspiria for him, because he definitely got more and more chicken as it went along and was like, I'll just give the people what they want. Where this movie is like, this is for me, man. I'm going to make this best possible vehicle that I possibly can. And even though a couple times it feels maybe a little tedious in the middle because he's really going deep on some of these choices and they may not be for you, I got to just say, when I saw it, I was like, this is a director. This is what a director does, man. It's a point of view, and he is in every second and every frame. We're looking at Dario Argento's brain. And when that happens, like with 2001 or something, I'm in. It's great. And it made me really love him as a director and this film in particular.
So full disclosure, Derek and I are friends. And earlier today we were talking, what are the things that we're going to bring to this? And Derek, I'm ready to be dismissive. Okay. I'm with Bryan because when I go to an Argento film, I'm looking for style, not necessarily substance. And I think he comes up with some great endings, and how he gets there, I don't really understand it always, but I love to look at it. I love to listen to it. I mean, obviously Deep Red, first partnership with Goblin. And even when he wasn't working with Goblin, the music in his films, opera I point to, all metal soundtrack essentially. I love it. I love it. So when I go to an Argento film, that is what I'm looking for. I want to feel something with the art that I'm looking at. Much like two directors that get mentioned all the time in the same hand are Fulci and Argento, right? But like, what's the difference? If I want to see gore, I'm going to a Fulci film. Also an artist, very deep themes and very dark imagery. But what am I looking for in Argento film? I want to see the art. I want to listen to the music. That's what I'm there for. So dismissive.
And yet celebrating at the same time.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What a genius, what an alchemist you are. Larry, how about you? Like, what are some things that kind of scream Argento to your horror loving heart?
Yeah, so I'm in a Discord for movies, and one of the conversations that happens a lot is, for lack of a better term, vibes versus script watching. So there's people who will watch a movie and all they do is just like look at the script to be like, that doesn't make sense. They can't get past the script stuff. And sometimes a movie is kind of going for that vibes, that sort of like the feeling, the atmosphere, which is what a lot of the Argento movies kind of are leaning towards. Even with just a lot of Italian horror and Giallo films tend to have that kind of vibe thing going, and some probably do a little bit better than others. But I think, at least with Deep Red too, like he's got a script that has, you've got the killer and there'll be a solution and the answer to it is and everything. But like how he kind of gets there, there's lots of sort of just like you're watching them sort of dealing with like the atmosphere around them, like when he's going to the house and he's looking behind the mural and stuff like that. Like it may not necessarily make a lot of sense in some ways, but like you kind of understand it and kind of go with it when you kind of see how he works around that with just sort of the music and just the camera shots and everything. And the other thing that I find interesting about this movie is there's a psychic subplot for like 5 minutes of the movie, and it's never really explained. It's not really a part of the movie per se. It's just that's how we start it. It just happens to be a psychic is in the same room as the killer. Whereas like a lot of scripts might focus on it and make it such a big deal, where here it's just sort of like it just exists and that's just how we start, and we'll just not bring it up again, which I admire that there's not a whole lot of explaining.
I kind of like that in different movies where they take something you think you're going to hook onto and then they dismiss it. And the only example right now I can think of is in Escape from New York, when Susan Hubley is in that scene in Chock full of Nuts, and she's set up to be the a character that will follow Snake Plissken throughout his adventure in New York, and like 30 seconds later she's killed.
Yeah.
And I like that because it kind of puts you on your back heels as an audience member, where you're like, well, I guess I didn't know where this was going. And he does that with the psychic, because you think her and her revelation in the opening part of the movie, which I think is a cracking great beginning to a flick, it does turn out to be nothing.
I think it's less romantic, but I'm going to just throw this into the discussion because I feel it's partly what sort of happened with the trajectory of Argento's career is the money factor. He was given money at the time to make films. Deep Red was a hit, like with Italian audiences. So I think that sort of gave him sort of the leverage to do something like a Suspiria. And not only that, but like, as you guys were saying, he's teasing some of the stuff, and then you see it full blown in like Phenomena, like the psychic stuff or whatever, that link or whatever. And then you also see some stuff, as Derek mentioned, introduced in Four Flies that you see more of in Deep Red. So I think all along he's always pushing the envelope, and then when he's given the center stage to do whatever he wants, boom, you get something like Deep Red. Boom, you get something like Suspiria. Boom, you get something like Tenebrae. And then you see the money kind of run out. And then, you know, which is a shame because I think creatively he's amazing when there's no limits, right? Whereas some directors, they're stronger when they do have limits, you know. I think that sort of speaks to his direction throughout his entire career. If you look at it as a whole, you know, like when you see that he doesn't have all his powers, he's not as great and sometimes super lackluster and awkward even, you know, because I feel like he's always shooting for the fences. It's just he doesn't have enough to, you know, like take him there or whatever. So sometimes it just falls flat. Like I happen to goddamn love Trauma. I don't know what the hell you guys are talking about.
It's not a good place to start.
Spreading all kinds of heresy on this show.
You can also tune in to Bryan and I debating Trauma over on Ian Simmons' Kicking the Seat episode.
Debating with everybody else. Like, why
you're going to love the story I have to tell. You're going to love it.
Can we just skip right over to Kristy's?
Yeah, sure. Let's do Trauma and then we'll come back.
I'm done with mine.
I love Trauma.
So, my favorite horror film of all time is Lucky McKee's May.
Oh, nice.
Aaron was he was so nice to let me write an essay about May for Hidden Horror. And I've been so lucky to become friends with Lucky over the years. So, you know, occasionally I'll ask him questions about May, considering it's my favorite. And I said, you know, one thing, my suspension of disbelief is just not there. Why would Adam, who's a big fan of Dario Argento films, right? Why would he ditch May to go see Trauma? Like, why, you know? And Lucky said to me, well, in film school, they taught me to write what you know. And I was like, you legitimately ditched a girl to go watch Trauma. And he just nodded solemnly.
It was his big American movie. I mean, of course he was going to.
It was supposed to be.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, for those who don't know, Trauma, I don't know, there may be only Deep Red or 70s Argento people here. I suggest watch it because there are some things I do like about it. But don't start there. That was my advice. Don't make that your first call. All right.
I love Trauma because it has one of the best reveals of like why the things are happening. It's like so insane that like nobody else would have come up with something that's ridiculously crazy.
Yeah. Is it better than A Monkey with a Straight Razor, though? I mean, come on.
No,
I mean, nothing is.
Yeah,
you know,
that's just iconic. You know?
I think the only like pure Argento post opera, the only thing I've seen of his that I'm like
Dracula
bravo.
3D.
Yep.
No.
That's the one.
The only thing I've seen that I'm like, bravo, that was amazing, is the first 20 minutes of Sleepless. And I mean just the first 20 minutes, because when Max von Sydow comes in, it gets pretty sluggish. But the first 20 minutes is the only time I see him sort of like, I'm going for it, with all the crazy shit on the train and that great Goblin score and the opening, and everything about the first 20 minutes is kinetic. And he just doesn't really have that anymore, even in something like what was the last one? Dark Glasses, you know. Yep. Again, it starts like with a bang, and then he's got really very little thereafter. I think that doesn't happen with Deep Red. It starts with a bang and keeps going, you know. And I wish Sleepless had too, because that would have been a rival.
I'm gonna give everybody an opportunity to dismiss me. For me personally, Argento hasn't made a great film since Opera. Come for me. It's okay. Come for me. I'm ready.
Well, Opera is his last fully realized great film. If you stop it before the last 20 minutes, then you're good.
There's some interesting stuff in Stendhal syndrome, but it's also really gross.
So, okay, now I've got a few things. So, okay. So, one, Stendhal is amazing.
Yes.
It's like the most fully realized character study he's ever done because it's so concentrated, so exact and weird. And like, yeah, Ozzy was too young for the part. And Chrissy, I have a little Dario Lucky McKee story. So when I first met Dario, when he was getting an award at this film festival in California, Lucky McKee was there just as a fan. He hadn't made any movies yet. All he had made was like the early version of All Cheerleaders Die. And he had a VHS tape of it with him. And we got to talking about, well, what is this? Why are you here? Who are you? Yada, yada. So we kind of like talked for like an hour. Fast forward to May coming out. And I was like, what? This can't be the same guy. So I emailed him and I was like, wait, what? One, I love your movie. Two, how did I not know this was happening? Like we were like, talking a little bit and then it kind of dropped off. I was like, well, you were busy making this movie.
I was going to say, so one of his best friends in the world he went to USC with is Ryan Johnson. And he told me Ryan Johnson is a ghost editor on May. I had no idea.
Okay, that's super interesting. Okay. You were talking about trauma, right? Okay, so
I mean, we can. I'd like to talk about Deep Red at some point.
Okay. Cut that out.
What a great idea.
Aaron, I have to say you shouldn't cut it out, and here's why. Dario Argento is not just one movie. Even though this is in the number one or the top three of his movies, you cannot fully understand this director without cataloging it. It's like saying Stanley Kubrick is Paths of Glory. He's not.
Yeah.
And so I think
I agree. He's not any one of his movies. He is a body of work. And I think you do get a big appreciation for Argento. As I think a couple of us have said, I think this, Suspiria, those are even Phenomena. Those are great entryway points, but you really need to explore because I think the Kubrick comparison is really apt because he is not any one of those films. But when you look at all of those films together, you go, this is an incredible creative. This is somebody who, when they have the resources, they are able to realize things and to imagine things to put a true vision on screen.
The opening with the flashback to the kid getting, seeing the dad die. And it has that sort of like brightly lit room, very similar to Pieces does something like that. Is this the first movie that does that sort of flashback with the bright colors and the murder that the kid sees or he may have done?
I don't know if it's first, but I do love daylight horror more than I like nighttime horror. Obviously, a film like Halloween or something is perfect for that. But most films that are set in day now look like night. It's the effect of modern cameras and the ability to color shade everything darker and darker and darker. It's so nice to watch an older film or even very few modern films where they really make it bright, even if it's a horrific moment. I love David Cronenberg for that too. He doesn't get too dark visually on stuff in a way like Zodiac is or something. I like the brightness of that scene, particularly against the black and white credits.
I think a lot of that too had to do with, I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre just came out around that time too, right? Like, so it's like you're sort of getting like, to me, it speaks more Hitchcockian when you see like brightly lit murder set piece or whatever. So I think he was sort of going more for that. Like, and he's always been a voyeur in terms of like, oh, you're going to see everything that this camera's going to, try to film or whatever, I don't think Argento was ever like, look at that entire opening scene to Suspiria where the female's hanging there. Like, you see everything. You see, there's no mystery in terms of what happens. You know what I mean? So I think that's always, I think, just been an Argento staple in terms of just being able to just see everything.
And he is courageous enough to say, I'm going to put this front and center. I'm going to make it a showcase moment. Actually, that's a great kind of segue to this film because I feel like Argento is the star of this movie. And he is always, he's calling attention to himself in the best way. I mean, it just goes from set piece to set piece to set piece. But there's even the thread through is gorgeous to watch, like the lead up to each one of those big moments. And I think there are maybe 5, 6 like really incredible showcase moments. I talk about like how horror movies are, basically they become iconic because they have that moment, that one that you always go, that's from that movie. This one has numerous one of those. So what I'd like to do is kind of like put a little spotlight on those. If you can think of like, what is the moment for you that really sings out from Deep Red?
Puppet.
The puppet, yes. Well, the puppet into the murder, I think, as well. Yeah.
The puppet into the murder, and the way that the murder happens is so like just brutal and diabolical. Like it just,
and that misdirect is
Yeah,
so
yep.
is so
it's bonkers.
weird.
It's so,
Yes, it's so
you don't
weird,
need,
but it
I don't
totally
care
works.
how many horror movies you've ever seen. I don't care what your mileage is. You will, like, if you've never seen this movie, you're not expecting what happens
Oh
during
yeah,
that
yeah,
scene,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
I think the violence also to that scene speaks a lot to
Yeah.
like, think about like if you're writing a scene, right? And you throw in a puppet, and then you throw in somebody mashing somebody's fucking skull into the corner of a molding thingy or whatever.
Not
Like
just
it's
his
just,
skull, his teeth,
that's what I'm saying. Like
Yeah.
directly his teeth, like boom, boom, boom. So there's a lot of anger going into the writing of that scene, which is like if you go back to Dario Argento's World of Horror, he does say like, if I wasn't writing movies, God help me, I don't know if I'd be out there killing people or whatever. That's kind of why those scenes work so well, I think.
It's funny though, when I see it, even that scene, the brutality of that scene and others throughout his whole catalog, I don't think of these as mean movies, like the way I think of Fulci movies, sort of as a bit of a mean spirit. And I admire those movies too. But there's certain filmmakers where you feel like they're not really on the side of humanity. But you look at a film like Day of the Dead by George Romero, and yeah, there's splatter everywhere, but you never feel like you shouldn't be watching it, and you always feel the humanity rising in a positive way. And I feel that way about Deep Red, that even though there are 5 or 6 really brutal murders where the camera does linger both on the effects of the murder and the aftermath of the murder, I never feel like, oh my God, I shouldn't have watched that. I just watched Human Centipede. This is not good. It's always enjoyable.
I only feel that with the lizard scene. Like,
oh yeah, the lizard
that.
scene. Yeah, there's a very brief shot of a lizard, a real lizard that
But
seems
it's fake.
to be
It's
impaled.
not real. I
It's
mean,
fake?
It's
They
robotic.
didn't really stab the lizard.
All right, I
Like,
feel
Is that
bad.
Carlo Rambaldi?
No. The lizard's real, but they just cut the pin in half and sort of glued it to the lizard.
Okay, I feel better.
I was like, is it a mechanical lizard? That's the
Absolutely.
best mechanical lizard of all
They
time.
didn't really kill that lizard. It's fake.
Good for them. Good for
The
them.
effect is fake. Like,
If only
Do
Cannibal
we have a
Holocaust
name?
could have figured it out.
Do
I
we
think
have
a lot of
name
it
for the-
is just that the blood is so kind of like heightened and not real realistic. That kind of helps with it not being mean. If someone made it now, it would be so gory and like realistic looking when he gets smashed into the corners of the furniture, that like then it would have been real mean. But in this one, it's just
It's like playful mean. It's
Yeah.
like, you don't be really awful. And I mean, kind of like in a childlike dare way, like coming up with like what the worst thing that could happen kind of thing. But it's not done from a place of sadism. It's from a place of one-upmanship.
Well, let me ask you this. If you were to die, would you rather be smashed against a mantelpiece? Would you rather be burned in a hot tub? Or would you rather be dragged by a garbage truck?
Spoiler alert, you're going to die someday.
I
It's
feel
like
like
a final
garbage truck
destination
would be
then.
at least fun
Dragged
for a
by-
little bit of it.
Not just dragged by a garbage truck, but also run over, like your
By-
face.
by-
down
After you had your head
with a
bonked against
speeding
the
car.
curb a bunch
yeah,
of
the
times.
curb slamming.
Right,
At least
right.
you're
Don't
unconscious.
forget the curb.
That is a great stunt, by the way. I
Oh
don't know who
my
the
God.
stunt person was who did that, but it's maybe they just
Well, they're
used
dead
the
now,
actor, but that's impressive.
Maybe it's
I'm
a
just
doll.
saying-
Maybe.
I'm saying like the detail to take it there. You know what I mean? Like the motivation to write a scene where like it ends up where it ends up. That's what I'm saying. Like whether it's shot with fake blood or whatever, like I think just that choice to like end up at the corner of the furniture or whatever, repeatedly getting this. Like, I think it speaks to his creativeness. It speaks to like, hey, I bet you weren't thinking about this, like surprise writing that you see a lot in his films, For example, the monkey with the straight razor, like you'll never expect that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I like that he goes in different ways. And actually, when I saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I was like, did he watch this? Because it is pretty much the same scene at the end of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood with the face against the mantelpiece. But I read something, I think it was in Troy's book, about the idea no one really knows what it's like to be shot. Well, I'm sure, sadly, many people know what it's like to be shot, but the 6 of us haven't been shot so far, knock wood. But the idea of boy, you know what it's like when your teeth hurt, and you know what it's like when somebody breaks your arm, or you know what it's like when you hit your head on a curb, or have a necklace choke you or whatever. Like, there's just a lot more like
you live a lot more dangerous life than I do. I'm like I've never had my head hit on the curb.
Relatable injuries is what we're talking.
Yes. Well, Aaron, I know we've known each other for 20 years, but I'm also a stunt man. I know I say man about town, but
sorry.
Yeah, I was in Fall Guy.
I meant to put that in your intro.
Quite frankly, if I was a stunt guy, I would be dead on day one. So not really.
Kristy.
There are 3 scenes I think that stick out to me. The bathroom scene when she's, writing out. And then when you come to it later and he figures it out, of course, it's one of those suspension of disbeliefs for me. We won't go there. Don't want to be dismissive or anything. The next one being in the mansion. This is going to sound so pretentious, but the mansion almost becomes its own character. Just think of all the layers that you're finding as he's walking around there. And that's even before it culminates in him, breaking the wall down and seeing what he sees. The one that gets me, though, every time is the reveal when he realizes he was looking at a mirror at the end. And I always wish I could go back in time to remember when I watched that the first time, like, did I connect those dots on my own? I want to remember if I did, because, man, I would have been really cool, wouldn't I have?
I was watching this years ago with somebody, like, proper, kind of, darkness in the room, that he was really kind of into the movie. And I was surprised. We get to that bit where, David's walking by, past the mirror. And if you go back and watch a movie, it doesn't cheat. You can see the reflection, right? It's there. And he goes, oh my God, there's somebody in the reflection of that mirror.
Yeah.
He noticed it. And I was like, what? Never.
Well, I was going to mention, like, I watched this with my wife recently, like I would say within the last couple of years or whatever. And now everything is so cleaned up. Everything looks great, like 4K max, whatever, right? Where it's like she noticed it right off the bat. Right. And the rest of the movie was pretty much spoiled because she was like, when is he going to get to,
Yeah.
And then I was like, that's interesting that, like, if you were to discover that right off the bat, and then, like, is the rest of the movie, like, she enjoyed it regardless or whatever, but that little piece, like, to Chris, like when Kristy was talking about it so excitedly, like, if you don't notice it and then you catch it when David catches it, it's like,
no,
it's amazing. It's mind-blowing. Yeah.
There's some other movie which someone's hiding in the shadows. It's the killer. And when they made it in 4K or maybe just 2K,
the Suspiria, right?
Was it? Well, there's somebody in the shadows. You're not supposed to see who it is, but they did the color brightness just a little too much. So now it's obviously that person. And people are like, oh, so that's the importance of color timing and having the artist present, I think, when they do that.
I think so too.
Yeah. If I might state, my 2 favorite scenes are very unusual. They're not the murders. A scene in the film that I really flipped out for was so minor that I even stole it for the movie I made where Aaron was assistant director under the table. There's a scene where they are walking in the piazza. It's the hero and the assistant musician. They're walking, and as they're walking, all the background actors are lining up in perfect symmetry along this perspective shot. And they're debating, hey, it's kind of a puzzle. I want to figure it out. It's really bothering me. But during this probably rather mundane page of speech, you're watching as the actors in the background are each given little, very symmetrical moments together. And then the scene continues and the camera goes in to somebody's apartment, I guess, but it looks like it's some sort of museum where they're watching television about the latest murder. And that whole scene is maybe 2 minutes long, but I was like, oh my God, this is like so much thought into the filmmaking of this expository scene that it makes it kinetic. And I think that's the second time I've used the word, because I'm energized when I see stuff like that. It's very cool. And then the second scene I love so much is where he's playing piano and he realizes he's being hunted by a person on the roof. And the little bits of roof tile fall onto his piano and he slowly starts to realize it, and the camera's zooming along the sheet music that he's trying to play and not break his concentration. And then he grabs that weird eagle statue to defend himself while not moving off the piano bench, and you see the shadow in the hallway. That's like the most Hitchcockian scene I think I've ever seen Argento film, because it feels like he storyboarded it to bring that effect about, which is, hey, so many people have been killed out of the blue. I'm expecting an out of the blue kill. But then the phone rings, and that's the jump start where he's like, somebody's in the house. It's very, very clever on a very cliched sort of scene of being stalked, but it's just perfectly done. So those two scenes come to mind more than any of the other hullabaloo.
For me, the thing I like, and it's not perfect, but I'm a really big rom-com fan. So I do like the rom-com elements between the two characters. Especially when they're just in the apartment talking about arm wrestling and who's stronger and stuff like that. I mean, it's like I said, it's 70s, so it's not perfect that we would like, but I do like sort of that playful sort of banter that I wish we would get more of, those kind of murder mystery screwball comedy type characters. They try it every now and then, but
speaking to what Larry just said about like the kind of comedy tinged performances or whatever, I wish there were more police activity in this movie in terms of that, right? Like in terms of the bumbling cops that like, so these guys I feel like don't care about what's going on like during the entire movie.
That guy
like,
just wanted tail.
What's that? Yeah,
that guy just wanted tail. That's it.
And a soda out of the machine.
Yeah.
There's like other movies where they handle that like bumbling cop thing, but they actually arrive at the conclusion of the mystery or whatever that I enjoy so well. I think that would have worked so perfectly in this movie.
They do come in shooting at the end and they save them from
from an apparent
the same
long ass break throughout the entire movie. They actually just bust in.
They were busy doing it. They were working on another case at the time, and that movie has yet to be made, but
I do like that cop, but I think I like the cop in Bird with the Crystal Plumage more.
I have a bad joke to make. When Larry was talking about the arm wrestling, I wanted to say, yeah, it was a little over the top.
Oh, yes.
Oh, you should have. Just meet us halfway and put it in there.
Oh, no.
Wow.
Yeah, just quickly about the arm wrestling scene, and if we talk about the sexual politics stuff, I absolutely love Dario Nicolodi's chemistry with David Hemmings in there. That could have gone horribly wrong. And I can absolutely see why Dario Argento started dating Daria Nicolodi, because she's cute as a button in that movie. She is like, every scene that she is in, she completely owns. And in not in a cliched way. There's nothing overtly Edwig Fenech about it or anything. She's just absolutely a killer character, and she's just really delivering. And she's in other Argento movies and holds her own. I particularly like her in Tenebrae as the assistant, but she's not given what she's given here, which is a sense of humor, which is so nice.
Yeah, agreed. And when Bryan and I talked about this movie on Ian's show, that was what Ian's takeaway. He's like, I want that movie. I want to follow, David and Daria around and like watch their exploits. I want to like have a whole series of films surrounding their hijinks in Italy, because they really are charming and wonderful. And I think you make a great point that she isn't given that same opportunity moving forward. The films that she did with Argento, like why he didn't utilize her gifts, her comic gifts more often, I'm not sure. But Derek, you were talking about sexual politics about an hour ago.
Yeah.
And here we are back to talk about them again. I think that somebody said, I can't remember who, but the idea that he just kind of puts characters forward. We have openly gay characters. We have women reporters, but he kind of puts them out there as kind of a matter of fact. It's not that there's any kind of statement around it, which I find fascinating and refreshing.
I was going to mention, like, one of my favorite scenes is when Marcus goes hunting for Carlo, and he comes upon him at his boyfriend's apartment, the boyfriend's played by a woman, dressed very kind of femininely, so it's this bizarre kind of thing. But I just think that scene's interesting because it's not judging anybody.
Right.
Marcus isn't judging his friend. He's just concerned for his friend.
Right.
Carlo is the one who's like self-deprecating and down on himself for being gay. And so it's sort of interesting that, like, the weight of what society is doing to him, right, is dragging him down. And I'm sure Mother doesn't approve. But his friend is there to help him, and doesn't, there's no ill will there. There's no, like, unnecessary, machismo kind of stuff, right? This movie does it. Four Flies has, like, the gay detective who's the only one that figures things out.
Right.
And then you've got Ava Robbins in Tenebrae, who's a transsexual actress. And then you've got, like, the lesbian characters in Tenebrae who are just this bizarre, almost
arguing couple.
Well,
just a normal arguing couple.
Like, this weird joke. Like their relationship isn't a joke, but, like, there's just weird little things, like when they're having, when you first see them in that cafe or wherever they're at, and they're having that little argument, and she's like, oh, you don't have to shove my face in it. And the girlfriend says, "Not tonight, honey." And then you hear on the soundtrack, yell of a cat on the video game. It's very subtle.
Yeah. Was it on purpose? Do you think that was on purpose?
Of course it is. Yes, it's very intentional. Yeah, of course. No, because I asked Dario once, and I said, as a gay guy, it's super interesting to watch horror movies that have gay characters that isn't judging them, and to have so many of them in his movies. They're all over the place.
Yeah, Cat of Nine Tails has a suspect who's gay, and so they have to interview him in a gay bar. And the feeling is the hero going into the gay bar is he's not nervous about it being a gay bar. He's more nervous that he's going to now do this interview and try to get some information where it's sort of not appropriate. But I watched that scene, and people are flirting with the hero who's straight.
Yeah.
But not in a lurid sort of cliched or mega marketed way. They're literally just there. It's a singles bar. They just assume he's gay, and he explains he's not, and whatever. But seeing that scene and the way he interacts with the actors and everything, it made me think Dario absolutely has people in his life that he loves and respects that are from that community, maybe working on this film or other films, and he does not give a shit. He is fine with everyone being equal. I'm just going to portray the cultural aspects of this community as honestly as I can without any hate or judgment. And he does that film after film after film. And I love him for it. It's so good. So good.
Well, and in fact, when I first met him and I brought this up, he just said to me, well, gay people are, like, out in the real world. Why shouldn't they be in my movies? That was his answer. So
that's what I get from it, Derek. Like the whole sense of, like, I'm just putting characters in my film. It doesn't matter what walk of life they come from, right? Like, it's just in order for this scene to feel natural and organic, these are players that I'm putting in my story. You know what I mean? That's what it feels like. It never feels any like there's any stunt casting or whatever. It always just feels so genuine, and that's part of the charm for an Argento film, I think.
That also kind of brings up the idea of kind of counterparts. We talk about, and we have a lot of mirrors in this movie. We have a lot of doubling, a lot of shadows. We have a very close-up view of things, and then we have very far away view of things. I think he's consistently playing with opposition and relationships,
perspectives, and everything.
Exactly.
The cinematography the composition of the cinematography is some of the greatest I've ever seen in any film, Hollywood or European or Japanese or anything. If you just watch it with the sound off, which you'll be missing out on Goblin, which we should talk about in a minute. But if you were to just watch it with the sound off, it looks like The Conformist or Apocalypse Now. And in terms of its absolute study of the framing of shots.
Mm-hmm.
And alongside of that, he's got this beautiful imagery. The editing is very herky-jerky.
Mm-hmm.
And I am assuming this is all intentional because the film, aside from, I think, kind of a little bit long when he's chipping away at the wall to reveal the painting beneath, the film moves like lightning considering how long it is and everything going on, because the editing is very frenetic. As soon as the scene gets going, it's off. Things are cut midline. Things are cut. Considering he's staged all these beautiful thoughts and shots, he's not actually spending that much time on any of them. He's moving very rapidly through them.
Well, a lot of that I think is due to the fact that he doesn't shoot coverage on anything. Like so just for example, I was on the set of Sleepless for 3 days, and I watched them shoot some conversation with Stefano Dionisi and I forget who else it was, but he would literally do a few lines of dialogue, turn the camera around, shoot the other bit, and so there was no coverage anywhere. So it's like he's basically just shooting what he needs, and there's no way to put it together otherwise.
Kind of the opposite of the George Romero, shoot everything and put it together later.
Yeah.
But I do love the rhythm. And, you know, at first I got to tell you, I fucking hated the rhythm because it was not the rhythm I'm used to. It's like somebody who loves country suddenly listening to, you know, speed metal. It's just, I needed to learn. I needed to come to it. It was no problem in the art or the approach. And since learning about it, it's informed my own art and my own approach. But it's when you see, this is why diversity is so good in the cinema, because you shouldn't just watch American films. You shouldn't just watch Italian films. You shouldn't just watch any particular region's work of art, because you can literally feel awkward about it for a little bit before you understand where the gold is. And then you will forever see the gold in it. And that's important.
Derek, you waited like an hour to tell us that you were on the set of freaking Sleepless. Like,
that's his. I mean, his book is a bit about that, right, Derek? I mean,
there's a bit about it, and I wrestled with that. Like, did I want to write about my fan interactions with him? You know, whatever.
Yes, you do.
I was like, I wanted to share these little stories. It was just really interesting. One, just being there was amazing. And at first, some of the crew members tried to kick me off the set, and Dario had to like tell them, "Oh no, he's allowed to be here. Leave him alone."
Do you like all of Sleepless, having been there?
I do like it, but I have such a weird sentimental attachment to it, since I was there to kind of watch some of the creation of it. I can't look at it the way I look at the other ones. I mean, yeah, it's not the tightest thing he ever made. It is sort of a greatest hits collection of bits. The story is kind of just so interesting to me. I think the style of it's interesting. It does look a little sort of flat, like the lighting's kind of not great. That's kind of my biggest complaint, I think. That, and that I didn't get to meet Max von Sydow.
Yeah.
Because Dario told me I would, and then the day I got there, one of the first things out of his mouth is, "Derek, I'm sorry, Max had to leave because of a family emergency of some kind." And so they were like, you know, shooting around him being gone.
Listen, I don't want to hog the spotlight from Derek. I too spent some time with Dario Argento. It was about 10 years ago at a convention called Monster Mania. Sorry, I was just trying to be a jerk. No, but at the time, at least, he didn't speak great English. He had an interpreter named Paolo, and I told him how Deep Red was my favorite film, and he said grazie, and it was a beautiful moment. So I understand, Derek. I understand.
Well, actually, do any of you speak Italian?
No.
I speak very, very little from watching Italian movies. I picked up a little bit. But it's very, I can't like put a lot of stuff together. But what I was going to say to piggyback off what Kristy said is the last time I saw Dario was at a Fango convention before he was going to shoot Dracula. I got to spend 2 days with him just hanging out. We had arranged this whole little thing. And so I got to have dinner with him a few times. It was interesting just to sit and like hang out with him and just see fans like slowly kind of come up, talk to him while we're eating, whatever. He was always super nice, never kind of annoyed by it. it was just sort of interesting to see that side of him that I had not seen before.
You know, here in LA at Beyond Fest, they did a fives. They showed 5 of his movies, and then he showed up at the end to talk to the audience. And it was very cool, and he was very nice. He did have an interpreter, and but a friend of mine from the Egyptian theater where this played was his handler that day, and she speaks Italian, and she said that he was just nothing but nice. I mean, he was very excited that people were showing 5 of his movies in a row and stayed there. I brought my son, who was 15 at the time, and he's like, I think I'm good now, because he saw like 50 people die on screen. But yeah, it was a wonderful night. It was very cool.
I don't know if you could see that Cat of Nine Tails poster behind me.
Yeah, that's my daughter's favorite film.
I brought that to Texas Frightmare for when he appeared there, right? So I had that in line, and then our good friend of the show, Mr. John Kitley, he like whispered to me, like, we were a few people like up to him, right? And he whispered to me, hey, you know, that's like his least favorite movie that he's made. And I was like, why the fuck would you tell me? Like, we're like 2 people away. Like, I could have gotten a Deep Red or whatever, right? But for me, it was like, it would be so cool if he were to like sign it on the black of the cat or whatever. That aesthetically, that's what I was seeing, you know? So as I was getting closer to him, I was like, fuck, like I'm going to have one of these awkward moments that fans always talk about, you know? So I get up to him and I unroll the poster, and I'm looking at his reaction while I'm like, you know, giving it to him or whatever. And, you know, he just kind of looks at it. He does do one of these, like, and then like he signs it. So in my head, I'm like, I wonder if he was like, why the fuck did this guy bring me this poster or whatever, you know? But he was so nice. You know, all that was probably being projected from my friend John Kitley. You know what I mean? But it was a great experience. He was so cool. And then we took an amazing photo, which to me, it's still a dream with him. And it was just an amazing experience meeting him.
Darren, I liked your reference of the country music and then listening to something else, because we haven't really talked about the music much in this film. This film is huge in terms of really Argento's direction he takes with introducing prog rock to horror. I don't know that we'd really seen that before. And Darren is a composer, and he always gets on me because I don't talk enough about the music in movies. So
I don't think you could ever talk about this film, or maybe even Suspiria, without talking about the soundtrack, because it is the film. It is so critical to the film. It's almost as big as if he made the choice to go black and white versus color. He did have an original composer, Giorgio Gasolini, who scored the film, and he was thinking he should up it. As the legend already has said, he courted Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd turned him down, and then he was turned on to this Italian band that eventually became the name Goblin. Goblin also did Dawn of the Dead soundtrack, but you know, that's aside from 3 or 4 cornerstone pieces, is sort of all over the map. I think this and Suspiria and maybe a few others, Tenebrae, are very much intact scores that can be listened to on their own and really enjoyed. And I do like in Deep Red, he chose some of the Gasolini stuff and he chose some of the Goblin stuff, and he kind of did a best of both worlds. But when I saw the movie, the first thing I wanted to do was listen to the soundtrack afterwards, which hasn't happened since I saw Star Wars or something, you know, or Traffic, which I think is an amazing score. So I was immediately inspired by it. I went deep on Goblin. I bought tons of Goblin stuff. I like pretty much every note they've ever done, and they're definitely cut above. I got very lucky in the fact that the original lineup reformed and played a North American tour in major cities. And I was in a major city, Chicago, so they played the Metro. How many of you went to the Metro Goblin show?
I was there, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. It was a wonderful, sold out, very crowded show where they played very overcrowded, where they played every song you would want Goblin to hear, and streamed pictures from the films in the background with the original lineup. So thoroughly enjoyable concert. Love the Metro, love the band, and never thought I'd see it, particularly at a time it was sort of the height of me loving them. I leave the Metro, and I run into the guy who created the Music Box Massacre, who I will leave unnamed here because he's so shy. But he grabs me by the collar and he said, "Darren, did you like the show?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, of course I love the show. It was great. It was perfect. I had a great time." He's like, "Do you want to meet Goblin?" "Yeah." "Do you know Goblin?" He's like, "I know those guys. Do you want to come backstage and meet them?" And I said, "Do they speak English?" And he's like, Kinda. But that's okay. You can still shake their hands. I said, "All right." So he leads me back through the labyrinth of the metro to where all the original members are. And we shake hands. And yes, their English is not great. My Italian is clearly non-existent. And we do a lot of gestures and hello, hello. But I do get in a conversation with Claudio Simonetti where he's like, "Did you like the show?" I mean, he's like genuinely nervous that people didn't like the show. He's like, "Did we disappoint?" And I said, "Absolutely not. It sounded great. The Metro is one of the best sounding clubs in town. You guys, not a bad note, not a bad song. Really, really, really enjoyed it." And I said, "You know what was great though? I expected it all to be guys my age." And at that time, I think I was 39 or something. I said, "I expected it all to be older horror fans, mostly male, the typical loser community that we are, that we understand stuff." But in fact, it was a super wide swath of people, all races, colors, and creeds, many, many young people. And I said to him, "This is a great sign that your music is going to live on." Because I've seen bands like Todd Rundgren where when those fans die, he dies, And I'm like, I didn't see that here. There is a young community who's discovering it now for the first time. And not only seeing the movies and saying, "I like that movie," but going out and buying the records and buying a concert ticket and buying a t-shirt and coming to see you. This stuff is going to last. You have definitely got something here that will go on for a long, long time, even after you guys shuffle off this mortal coil. Now, of course, they don't speak English that well. That took about 10 minutes of my life. But he started to cry. He was very into that. He was like, "Oh my God, I've never thought of that before." There were a lot of young people. He was very excited. So anyway, I got to give Claudio Simonetti a bit of soul there. But I really, truly believe, even though the original lineup hasn't toured since, that I saw something special. I got to relate something special, and hopefully they'll continue on for a long time to come.
Thank you.
Can you imagine aiming for Pink Floyd and then getting Goblin, but meanwhile creating a whole other thing with Goblin? You know what I mean? It's just amazing. It's like an integral piece of this genre, right? If you like Giallo in general, music is always right there in the corner, just being like, "Hey," But what's funny though, and what's awesome is that there's so many different kinds of different formulations of music in this genre. When you listen to Blood and Black Lace, that
tango
soundtrack is very
steamy
distinct.
jazz.
Yeah, very to that movie, right? And it's not until you watch that movie where it's actually effective. Because if you were to see that fucking soundtrack in another movie, it probably wouldn't work as well, right?
Yep.
So a lot of these movies are very the DNA is wrapped within each other, So with this, I think it's so interesting that you hear the lullabies, you hear that bombastic, I was in preparation for this, I was researching and reading all kinds of stuff on the internet, and I happened upon a comment on the puppet scene, right? Where somebody mentioned, if this was in another movie, it really wouldn't work. I don't even understand why it works in this movie, blah, 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 right? And I was like, because it's fucking Goblin. That's why it works in this movie. But not just that. I think it's so specific onto this movie, onto the scene, onto everything. If you listen to the opening of Four Flies with the drum, he's trying to kill the fucking fly, right? But it's all predicated on, that tension building of the fly or whatever. He uses music so perfectly, I think, as a filmmaker, as a storyteller. So I think it's very important in this movie. I think it wouldn't have worked any other way if Goblin wasn't used. If Goblin wasn't even a piece of Argento's history in terms of his filmmaking, can you even imagine what the films would have looked and sounded like?
It's a coupling like Steven Spielberg and John Williams or something. Right. It's just a match made in heaven. And Argento definitely, like Steven Soderbergh and other directors, he understands music.
Oh, yeah.
Tarantino understands music. He understands when it helps, when it hurts, what it should be, what it sounds like. Even though may not be musicians themselves, can definitely tell the composer exactly what's appropriate. I thought about that scene where he's wandering the house and it's just dung 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 dung. That scene would be molasses without that.
Right.
And
it
it's
just
such a good riff.
To your point, in terms of keeping it moving almost at lightning pace, like it does that. Like it definitely, like I said, I watched I say overlong because sometimes I just like watching the regular version, but I will say the pacing is great. It's just sometimes we get muddled in certain like scenes of like conversational things or whatever.
Yeah.
However,
the shorter cut is perfect on its own.
Yes.
But I do find myself watching the longer cut just because I like it.
Now, Darren, to you, like the question that I pose to you is like, because you're so musically inclined, is do you think it would have worked if he gotten his wish and gotten Deep Purple or Pink Floyd or somebody with much more of a name for this movie? Or do you think it would have just been completely different?
I feel like a soundtrack for any film, original or library stuff, it needs to have a consistency that aligns with the picture. And I think Deep Red is a perfect marriage and it works. Now, later stuff like Demons or Opera, where he kind of hodgepodge together Keith Emerson and a little bit of Claudio Simonetti and a little bit of this, a little bit of that, I don't feel it has the same power. And I realize that's a different decade and a different.
Just watch yourself when you're talking about Demons.
All right. I know Demons is a favorite of many, and
Just
me
watch
too.
yourself.
I like Demons quite a bit. But the idea is he has chosen Dario Argento is one director with one vision. Goblin is one band with one sound. I think there's something in just the propulsive nature, even if it's diluted and not to its detriment a little bit with Gasolini's original compositions here and there, just to have some orchestral stuff. I think the idea of the focus of it, the focus of the courageous shots, the courageous script, courageous music choices, the courageous casting, everything about it feels like a person who has really committed. And I see later work and I feel like he's like, well, I should probably put this rock song in here. I may not think it works perfect, but let's put it in there. I feel like there's some compromise in some later scores by him. And that's why maybe I really like the score for Tenebrae, because there's not that in that one. And it is just Goblin. But yeah, the more focus somebody can bring to a project's choices and the less they get distracted by the market or the whims of producers, the better the work's going to be.
I was going to say, I'm not a musician. I was a DJ at an indie alternative station for like the better part of 20 years. And every few months I would do a highlight on Goblin or Dario Argento soundtracks. And without fail, I'd have 3 or 4 people calling just to know more about it. And I consider Claudio to be one of the greatest composers. I really do. And it's a shame that more people are not aware of him. I adore him so much.
For sure.
I recently had a Dario Argento music happening like in the wild. I went to go see the musician John Grant do a show in Portland, Oregon. And I adore him. I know he's a big horror fan. And what music does he come out with, like before he hits the stage? Part of the score to Cat Nine Tails.
Wow.
The stage is dark. There's a candle on his piano lit. The music from Cat Nine Tails is playing, and I'm like, what is happening? What's funny is I was going to give him a copy of my book because I know he's a fan of Dario's stuff, but I didn't know to that degree that he would do that.
Right.
And he went to high school with Jace Anderson, who co-wrote Mother of Tears.
Ah.
Oh, wow.
And so I had been talking with Jason. I said, hey, I'm going to see John Grant. I'm excited, yada, yada. She's like, oh, I hope you get to meet him, blah, blah. And so it was just kind of this weird kind of collision of things. I don't know.
I find Cat o' Nine Tails to be thoroughly enjoyable. And I actually probably watched it more than Deep Red, even though Deep Red is clearly a better film. But I just love Cat o' Nine Tails.
What I like about the Goblin score is that it is so kind of special and unique. It invites you in to explore more about Italian horror movie soundtracks. And that way you do come to people like Ennio Morricone, and you do come to Bruno Nicolai and Rizzo Ortolani.
Stelvio Cipriani.
You know, it's like suddenly you're like, oh, it isn't all just one thing. The early Gialli, like that main wave from like 1970 to 1973, 74, there was a sound to it. And this is a sound unlike any of that. And that's kind of what I think, Argento, you were talking about the big swings earlier. Like he goes someplace no one has gone before, while he's also presenting his grand Giallo, where it's like, you would think that if he was doing like the Giallo to end all Giallos, he would do something like a Morricone or a Nicolai, but he doesn't. He does something completely contrary to that. And I think that's what's amazing. You were talking, Darren, that like, this is him like really starting to feel the courage of his convictions. I mean, I would say he goes even further when you have things like Inferno. Like Inferno is so insane. And then you have Tenebrae, which it continues to kind of lean forward into this bonkers mentality of, I can put whatever I want on screen. And as long as I support it with great visuals, great music, great performances, or at least interesting performances, it'll fly. And he's right.
Not just that, but like, can you imagine going into your project wanting somebody like a Pink Floyd or a Deep Purple, wanting that and creating your vision based on that want, right? And then not being able to get that, so you kind of go another direction and then formulate, like, say, or meet somebody like a Claudio Simonetti in Goblin, and then all of a sudden create something just that much more interesting and amazing, right? Being the guy responsible for that, and then anything afterwards is like,
yeah,
I could do whatever the hell I want to do.
Yeah,
you know?
that's
Like,
right.
There are no rules, and that's one great thing about Deep Red, is it really illustrates that to a thriller, to a giallo, to a soundtrack, to a shot, to a cast, there are no rules in artistry. You can literally do whatever works, and even if it doesn't work now, it'll work next time. So, like the ending of Four Flies on Grey Velvet is a great moment. It works in that movie fine, but to harvest it later works even better. So it's an artistic statement, and you don't see that a lot in horror, like a true artist like functioning at that level at that time.
And that is a great way to kind of lead us into our final thoughts, like what Deep Red means to you and why people should seek it out. Derek, would you mind kicking us off?
To sort of like piggyback on what you were saying, with the sound of the movie being so different, and it's a Giallo that doesn't look like any other Giallo. I think in a bold way, he was trying to maybe reinvigorate or kind of like reinvent the genre, because he'd worked in it, for a few movies, and, other directors had, made a lot of them. And so I think he was maybe afraid that they were maybe a little stale, right? And so this was kind of his way of like, well, I'm just going to make it look like nothing else, and so with like the noir influences and like the screwball comedy stuff. And I just think it's a really interesting movie, just in every aspect. And I do think that in the end, the two kind of stars of the show are not just Dario's directing, but I think Dario Nicolodi and the score to the movie really just kind of hold the thing up.
I feel like if Argento wasn't the first, definitely one of the first where I was watching his films and there was just such a beauty about it. And being a huge music fan, the music of Goblin, just like the partnership of those two, it's just legendary to me. It's so weird. I feel like I'm not like being scholarly about it. I just love this film. I just love this film so much. I was showing it to my boyfriend the other night and I was like, I'm so excited you're watching this. It's just one of those films. Like I said, it's like a work of art, even if not everything makes sense. I mean, but here's the thing. Your favorite films don't have to make sense. Your favorite music doesn't have to make sense. If you like it, you like it. I know it sounds good because it sounds good to me. I really don't care what anybody else thinks. So Deep Red, just a beautiful work of art, and I love it.
And a quick shout out to our friend Will Terrence. You recently introduced this film at a screening in, where is that?
In Buffalo. He does screenings here in Buffalo.
Thank you for your service in that regard as well. Larry, how about you?
For me, Deep Red is one of those films that has it reminds me of moments that I've had, especially. It reminds me of the Music Box of Horrors and Massacre, and going to see Goblin live talking about Argento. Like this one is like the one that just gives me the most the feelings of why I really like talking about horror with people. So it's like a warm blanket of a movie for me at this point. So that's my big takeaway from my experience with Deep Red.
Thanks. Darren.
You know, I like that warm blanket metaphor. I've talked about similar things with other people in the past. There are certain sets of movies that, God knows why, the content may even be extreme. They make you feel good. They make you want more, and they make you want to share it with your friends. As I said in my beginning intro, Aaron turned me onto it. So Aaron, thank you for this. This is a great gift of a friend to check out more Dario Argento. And I have done so. And now I feel like the rest of the world should hear more. And I think many of us, Bryan, I know for sure, is helping to bring this catalog of movies that may be unknown to American culture, get it more visibility. And it certainly in the last 10 years has become more popular. There's a whole channel on Shudder about it, whole channel on Tubi about it. And I would say explore those titles. There's dozens, if not hundreds of great works there.
And Bryan.
Well, I'm wearing the t-shirt, right? Like I think the only thing I'm going to make a change. I'm going to put the Christmas tree in the background and then put it onto like an ugly Christmas sweater. You know what I mean? I think that would be awesome. I love this movie. It's not my favorite Argento movie. For me, a warm blanket of Argento would be the Creepers cut of Phenomena. I know it's stupid to say, but that's my first intro to Argento and takes me all the way back. This movie came out it's like a famous double feature that if you ever search Deep Red trailers on YouTube, it'll come up where it's like, come join us this weekend. We're showing Eyeball and Deep Red. It's an amazing like trailer. And I was like, man, I wish I was alive back then, but I think I was one. But
you
I
could have
wish
got in.
That's true.
This one holds a special place in my heart in terms of just the trajectory of Argento films. Like I think it was made at the perfect time when it was needed to be made to sort of inject that lightning in a bottle that Giallo is and was, you know, because at that point Giallo was kind of waning. I almost wish that we can go back in time and be like, these are Giallo films, like all these, you know, and then make more and I'll pump money into them or whatever, you know, just to have some more activity towards the 80s or whatever. But I say that because the films that we did get were amazing in and of themselves, like in that period. Like, would the genre be the same without Tenebrae? Would it be the same without Murder Rock? You know, I know I said that, but like I think Murder Rock also lends a certain flavor to this entire genre, as does Deep Red. So it's my way of saying, like, if Deep Red didn't exist, can you imagine like the whole cinematic landscape of just not just the genre of Giallo, but Italian horror and then everything else that came out afterwards? Like, would Suspiria have come out? Would any of those movies have come out? So I say all that super long-winded just to say that the world needed Deep Red at the time.
If I could jump on what you just said there, Bryan, I mean, I think this was an important turning point in Italian horror. I don't know that we would have had Suspiria if we hadn't had the success of Deep Red. And Suspiria opened it was kind of a new chapter. And we did get things that emerged in the 80s, like Fulci's Zombie and The Beyond and things like that. So yeah, it's an incredibly important film, and I have so enjoyed this conversation. Thank you all for bringing your experiences, your personal encounters with the makers of this film. It's been super, super cool. Looking forward to having you all on again very soon. And until next time, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare.